It's one of the longest, loudest, and most consequential debates in modern history. A struggle that outlasted revolutions, toppled empires, bankrupted superpowers, and divided the world.
We will secure our destiny! Forward, comrades, towards
For over a
brighter
century,
future.
capitalism and socialism weren't just economic theories, they were battle lines. Every patriotic speech, every worker uprising, every recession, and every proxy war carried the weight of this debate. Here's the part most ideology influencers never tell you. Neither system ever worked exactly as the textbooks promised. Not once, not anywhere. When crises hit, war, famine, inflation, collapse, reality exposed the harsh truth. The story begins long before anyone coined capitalism or socialism. For most of human history, the economy wasn't about growth or opportunity. It was survival. Monarchs claimed divine right. Landlords owned nearly everything. Peasants produced just enough to avoid starving. Progress moved slower than glaciers. Wealth came from land, labor, and war. Productivity barely increased, and the idea that ordinary people could grow rich through trade or innovation would have sounded like madness. In ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Rome, wealth was concentrated in the hands of a few. Farmers tilled land they did not own. Soldiers fought for generals, and merchants navigated city-states' complex tolls and taxes. Societies were zero-sum. If someone gained, someone else lost. The seeds of inequality, exploitation, and concentration of power were planted early. Fast forward 1,000 years, and the medieval feudal system dominated Europe. Lords, kings, and clergy controlled resources. Serfs worked the land, producing enough to survive, often paying a significant portion to their overlords. Innovation existed, but it moved slowly, constrained by custom and hierarchy. Wealth was land, and land was power. Everything else was secondary. Then came the Industrial Revolution, and the world changed forever. Late 18th century Britain became a crucible of coal, iron, capital, and restless ambition. Machines replaced muscle. Factories replaced workshops, and a new kind of power emerged, the power of private capital. Individuals could invest, risk, and own at a scale previously reserved for kings. Wealth and productivity exploded, yet with this rapid transformation came extremes. Cities choked on pollution. Children worked 12-hour shifts. Slums bred disease. The gap between rich and poor widened faster than ever before. But one undeniable truth remained. Capitalism produced more goods, more wealth, and more speed than the world had ever seen. And then socialism was born, not as a utopian dream, but as a desperate reaction to industrial capitalism's brutality. By the mid-1800s, thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels looked at the smokestacks, the worker riots, and the factory floors stained with sweat and blood, and concluded that the system itself was the crime. They saw capitalist wealth as stolen labor, extraction disguised as opportunity. They argued that if workers collectively owned the factories, if profits were shared, if production served human need rather than private gain, society would finally be just. No more exploitation. No more boom and bust cycles, just rational planning and equality. It sounded clean, elegant, moral. For millions living beneath the gears of early capitalism, it sounded like justice. But theory is one thing. Real life is another. The first major test of socialism wasn't in a classroom. It was in the ashes of an empire. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, Lenin inherited a country starving, illiterate, and backward. The Tsar was dead. The old elite fled or were executed. Suddenly, a vast territory with 150 million people needed a new operating system. The Soviets built one. State ownership of land, factories, banks, and resources. Prices were set by bureaucrats. Production targets replaced profit motives. Private business was wiped out. In theory, it should have created perfect equality and efficiency. In practice, it created chaos. Without market prices, planners didn't know what people wanted or how much to produce. Without competition, factories stagnated. Without personal incentives, workers had no reason to exceed the minimum. Shortages became normal. Lines became culture, and agriculture, the backbone of the Russian economy, collapsed into famine. Lenin eventually retreated, allowing limited private trade just to keep the country alive. Yet socialism remained seductive. Capitalism wasn't exactly looking good either. By the early 20th century, capitalism had delivered immense growth, but also wild instability. Speculation ran rampant. Trusts dominated industries. The wealthy lived like royalty while millions scraped by. This imbalance detonated in 1929, when the US stock market imploded. The Great Depression wasn't a recession. It was a global economic heart attack. Banks collapsed. Unemployment hit 25%. Entire countries saw their financial systems wiped out. For millions, capitalism looked not just flawed but fatal. By the 1930s, the uncomfortable truth emerged. Neither system worked as advertised. Socialism promised equality, but delivered scarcity. Capitalism promised prosperity, but delivered collapse. Then World War II forced both systems to operate under maximum stress. The Soviet Union, despite inefficiencies, mobilized its entire population with terrifying speed. State control allowed it to redirect resources toward survival. Capitalist nations like the United States transformed into industrial supermachines, showing just how powerful private innovation could be when paired with national coordination. After the war, the scoreboard wasn't ideological anymore. It was GDP, infrastructure, growth, and living standards. From 1945 to 1991, the world became a laboratory. On one side, the Soviet bloc, central planning, state control, suppressed markets. On the other, the US and its allies, regulated capitalism, private enterprise, with safety nets born from Depression-era lessons. Millions of people lived the consequences of these competing experiments. The results were dramatic. In the Soviet Union, early decades brought rapid industrialization. Illiteracy fell. Housing expanded. Military power soared. But inefficiency festered. Factories produced unusable goods. Farms failed. Innovation stagnated. By the 1970s, the USSR lagged in consumer technology, capable of building rockets but not refrigerators. Capitalism adapted. Governments introduced regulation, deposit insurance, antitrust laws, social security, public health care, and unemployment benefits. Capitalism didn't become perfectly fair, but it became survivable. Its ability to evolve became its ultimate weapon. By the 1980s, the gap was clear. Western living standards surged while Soviet economies stalled. The Cold War wasn't won by ideology, it was won by performance. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Soviet Union collapsed not from bombs or invasions, but from empty shelves, broken incentives, and a system that could no longer sustain itself. Capitalism's victory lap didn't last. By the 1990s and 2000s, global finance, supply chains, and credit transformed it. Inequality soared, corporations gained unprecedented power, and crises like the 2008 financial crash reminded the world that capitalism's instability never disappeared, it just wore new clothes. Meanwhile, socialism re-emerged, not in old Soviet forms but in softer, more nostalgic versions. Wealth taxes, nationalized healthcare, free education, stronger unions, and economic leveling returned in many countries. Younger generations, crushed by housing costs and stagnant wages, began to question whether capitalism still worked for them. Today, almost no country follows pure capitalism or pure socialism. Scandinavia blends free markets with strong social protections. The US thrives in innovation but struggles with inequality. China merges authoritarian control with market-driven growth. Every major economy is a hybrid, a mix of markets, state power, incentives, and protections. The lesson is simple. Economic systems don't shape humans as much as humans shape them. Greed drives innovation under capitalism and oppression under socialism. Power concentrates in wealth or politics. Propaganda shifts. Human tendencies persist. The real question isn't which system is better. It's which adapts best. History answers. The system that evolves wins. Capitalism survived through reinvention, laissez-faire, the New Deal, globalization, tech capitalism. Socialism collapsed where it refused to adapt. USSR, Maoist China, North Korea, but thrived where combined with markets. Scandinavia, post-1978 China, parts of Western Europe. Ideology didn't decide winners. Adaptation did. Capitalism prioritizes incentives. It unleashes creativity, risk-taking, and productivity, but risks inequality, instability, and cycles that punish the vulnerable. Socialism prioritizes equality. It reduces poverty, expands access, and ensures dignity, but without incentives, productivity stagnates. Without markets, information collapses. Without open institutions, corruption festers. Both systems have strengths. Both have failures. Both leave scars. Modern economies carry those scars. Mixed systems aren't proof one side won. They're proof that neither can survive alone. The debate continues. AI, climate disruption, demographic collapse, energy transitions, global debt. The challenges of the 21st century ignore ideology. Market capitalism struggles with long-term planning and social cohesion. Socialist planning struggles with flexibility and innovation. Nations that thrive in the next century will combine both: private innovation with public direction, freedom with stability. History didn't choose capitalism or socialism. History chose survival. Every generation renegotiates the balance. The debate was never really about ideology. It's about power, capital, the state, banks, unions, corporations, regulators. Power doesn't disappear, it only changes hands. If this gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.